What is going on, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with Ryan Hallam once again, and this is Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk here on fantasyalarm.com. Hallam, another week. How's everything, man?
Can't complain, man. We have it's been a good weekend. Actually, was a hair social this weekend, which was nice for the first time in quite a while. Sports is back. We almost have all the MLB playing. We're a couple weeks away from hopefully the NFL season. NBA playoffs are just starting. NHL playoffs are in full swing. It's the sports apocalypse we were hoping for many, many months.
Yeah, we've been waiting, and we finally have this moment. And while it is a lot of work for all of us in the space, we do it with a smile on our face because, hey, it's better than what we were dealing with in March and April. Very little hope. At least we have our sports back right now. Now, before we get started, because we're going to talk a little NFL news, and then we're going to go over running back systems and systems in a way where we're going to identify handcuffs versus standalone value backs that are considered the second running backs of the core of their specific teams. But first, I want to say this. Every time I'm on a stream, whether it's with Ryan Hallam or anyone else from the Fantasy Alarm staff, I generally end it the same way by saying always dominate, no other option. Now, this morning, I woke up to a voicemail from one Ryan Hallam. At the end of that voicemail, Ryan, don't know if you remember leaving it or not. I hope you do. But at the end of that voicemail, you said, keep dominating, no other option. That fueled me this morning. And because of that, it hasn't died out, Ryan, because I'm ready. I want to help people win. And that's what it's all about. Whether I make mistakes in my draft, whether I'm happy with my draft, whether I'm in a draft with some of our subscribers, this is about the subscribers winning. Always dominate, no other option. You inspired me this morning, Ryan Hallam. You did.
You know, we've done so many of these things now together, and it is always how you end it. So I feel like I've kind of engulfed your passion, your energy, and your catchphrase. So, yeah, I didn't think of any better way to end a voicemail for you than that right there.
Well, I appreciate it. Now, Ryan, I want you to stay motivated because even though you had a little bit of bad news occur to your San Francisco 49ers, and it seems like that's the narrative that's playing every time you and I host a live stream together, something happens with the 49ers. There's a piece of news. Now that receiving core, which was already a little bit banged up, add another to the list. You already got Deebo Samuel out. We don't know if he'll actually be able to play week one. Signs are pointing to no. Now Jalen Hurd joins the injury party. How bad is it at this point? Could be a torn ACL. We're awaiting. But at this point, Ryan, I mean, what is your reaction as a 49ers guy? And who, because I hate having to go this direction, but we are a fantasy team here, and we have to know who's up next because there's a dollar value receiver to be had now with open targets possibly.
I mean, who do I have to talk to do this with somebody different? Every time I do this with your guy, my team goes down. I'm tired of it. Who do I have to talk to? I got to get on this with somebody else.
Yeah, I believe that's Mr. Bender, but he puts this together for a reason.
Hold on. All right. He probably won't answer me.
He's not answering your call. Are you kidding me?
I don't even know the last time I talked to him, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't on the team last year. He was injured again, last year as well. So it's not like there's an open, well, he did this last year, and that's what we have to fill. So it's kind of the second year without him. He's never actually played a game for the team yet. But, of course, with Deebo Samuel's injury, we were hoping to have, Hurd step up a little bit this year. He's a good physical receiver. I thought he could fill in some for Deebo Samuel, and obviously that's not going to happen. It's not official yet, but it's been deemed a severe injury. So whether it's the ACL or not, it doesn't sound like he's going to be ready anytime soon. This bumps Kendrick Bourne up even farther. The guy that I like, I've drafted him in almost every best ball draft that I do, just because Jimmy Garoppolo and he are quite the pair in the red zone. Bourne is a great, just has a knack of finding an open spot in the back of the end zone, and Garoppolo does a great job of finding him. And he just really kind of stepped up as the season went on. And now if Samuel is out, which he said, it's looking really strong that he's not going to start the season, and with Jalen Hurd out, I think Kendrick Bourne just picks up that depth chart a little bit more, and he could be a guy who could be fourth wide receiver or flex kind of play in leagues if things continue the way they are.
Well, in your drafts and auctions, don't expect them to go up too much when it comes to value. Still going to remain in that $2 max, but definitely $1. But someone who I've been waiting to see if his ADP would go up, and I think now we'll finally start to see some movement, another man down on his team, and that would be Brandon Ayuk. Because, Ryan, I don't know what it is. I just think that there are a lot of people in our industry and also casual players that think that Deebo Samuel's fine. And I don't think he is fine. And that's a problem. So. And people still don't see that. It's not really reflective in drafts as much as we've seen down the stretch. But now with Brandon Ayuk, he's still going to be sitting there in the 11th round, Ryan. I mean, I've seen him go in the 11th, the 10th, early as the 9th. We're not going to see this guy go up to starter's price. I'm going to continue going after him. I feel like I'm going to own more Brandon Ayuk at this point than any other rookie on the board.
Yeah, and I think he's kind of forgotten. He didn't have the flashy name of Judy or Lamb or Justin Jefferson's getting a lot of play now. And so, yeah, I think he's somebody who is being undervalued. And now with two receivers down, clearly, maybe it wasn't the plan for him to be so involved. But obviously things change and injuries happen. And the 49ers had a lot of injuries last year. It was next man up. I mean, that's the way it is. And, I think he's going to have a chance to make a nice impact. He's looking like the number one receiver going into the season right now. I know the team is kind of run first, but they still throw plenty. If you look at Garoppolo's numbers last year, they were better than people think they are or would think they were. So the ball's got to go somewhere. It can't go to George Kittle through the air every time, which, by the way, got paid. Woo! George Kittle got paid.
Just another reason why these streams make the impact that they do, because it's because of this stream, Ryan, that the 49ers were watching and we're going after what you wanted because it's your world, that now he got paid. You asked for it, multiple streams, you finally got it. That's what happens when you hang with the family.
Absolutely. $15 million a year, it's a lot for a tight end, but I thought he was going to get more. I'm not upset about his contract at all. Really excited for the season this year, even with these receiver injuries.
Now, you mentioned the 49ers run game, and that brings us to our next topic. And this is something that I feel like a lot of players confuse when it comes to running back handcuffs versus second running backs that have standalone value. And I feel like what happens with that, Ryan, you could tell me if you disagree, often mistakes I see is that people abandon their own strategies to try to essentially snipe handcuffs from other owners, paying a little bit of a higher price, whether it's your first depth pick or your 9th and 10th round, taking a vacant handcuff when you don't have the other side of that handcuff to lock it in. And Ryan, that's something that I feel like hinders fantasy players by just taking someone like, let's just say, a Tony Pollard in the 8th round, just because you want to snipe the Zeke owner. If you're not the Zeke owner, just doesn't make sense. There's a difference between handcuffing your running backs and whether or not a running back is a handcuff or has standalone value. Ryan, you've been in this industry longer than I have, and I feel like this is something that still is a big ball of confusion among players.
Yeah, and to me, like you said, there are some running backs with standalone value. Kareem Hunt obviously comes to mind right away. He's going to get involved in the pass game, and he's going to get some carries. So he's a guy who, 5th or 6th round, you're going to take him anyway. Another guy that I think is kind of that way is Latavius Murray of the Saints, because Alvin Kamara isn't a workhorse back. He just doesn't carry the ball 250 times. So a guy like Murray is going to get 10 to 12 carries a game, regardless of Kamara's health. And when Kamara goes down, of course, his value skyrockets. But I think Murray is another guy that gets drafted pretty early. But to me, there are so many running back by committees now, or second guys who do have a role regardless, that handcuffing to me is to me, it's going to go on away. It's going to be a thing I think is going to kind of fade out. If you have Dalvin Cook, okay, Alexander Madison. I mean, if you have, but I mean, it got like Leonard Fournette. I don't like anybody behind him. Nobody's going to pull Leonard Fournette's value. Derrick Henry, if he goes down, he doesn't. I don't feel there's some guys who don't really have handcuffs as well. It's just that one guy behind him isn't going to pick up the slack. Christian McCaffrey's another one. Reggie Bonifant, he's not going to be Christian McCaffrey if Christian McCaffrey goes down. So handcuffing to me is become kind of an art. It becomes just. It's a very different situation now where there's only a few instances to me where it really makes sense. I think it gets muddied an awful lot more this year with all these rookies that went to places with veteran running backs. So to me, it's almost gotten to the point where I don't necessarily, outside of a few guys, like Dalvin Cook, especially with his injury history, outside of a few guys, I don't know that I'm handcuffing backs. I want to pick, in the 8th, 9th, 10th round, a guy who I think has a chance of taking the job, without an injury, or a pass catching back like a Nyheim Hines or somebody like that. More than just, if I draft Le'Veon Bell, I don't necessarily need Frank Gore. I'm going to shoot at someone else, maybe Damian Harris in New England, that might not even need an injury to take over the job.
Right. And that's a real situation right there when it comes to the Patriots, because you're essentially putting your hand into a hat and pulling out a number, because that's very tough, as it has been in the past. But now with Sony Michel, we'll have to see if he's able to start the season healthy. I mean, Lamar Miller signed, immediately put on PUP. Then you've got your other backs there that you mentioned. I mean, Rex Burkhead, what's his role going to be? I took him in the 20th round of the Scott Fish Bowl for that reason, just to get those random spurts of production. Harris, you mentioned. And, of course, the running back, who is not, to me, really a running back. He is a running back by position, but anyway, helpful in the receiving game, and that's James White. So that's a little bit of a different situation, and that's where you mentioned Kareem Hunt. That's how we're expecting him to be used as well. You mentioned a number of running backs, Ryan. Now, here's the deal with Derrick Henry. You're right. I tried playing the vacant handcuff game, as I call it, by getting Dion Lewis, thinking, I paid $1 for this guy. He's going to get some production. They can't manage to give Henry everything, right? Then they did. And I got nothing out of it, and it was a wasted roster spot. And reports are coming out where they don't know exactly, and these are just reports, how they're going to use Darrington Evans. So with that, in that whole murky situation, it's Derrick Henry or bust. So yes, you can still think Evans, but don't pay too high of a price, because we saw what Derrick Henry can do with a ton of carries, and he can most certainly do it again.
And now Dion Lewis is in New York sitting behind Saquon Barkley, and he'll disappoint people there too, because he's not going to get a lot of play with the Giants. But yeah.
And you know what everyone's going to say, Ryan? Everyone's going to be, but Saquon, he missed 4 games last year. He missed a few games last year. That, he's capable of getting hurt. Everyone's capable of getting hurt. But that doesn't necessarily translate. This guy's going to get all the carries. Could be divided a lot of ways. For the Giants situation, yeah, if it's Saquon, I'm not thinking as much about Dion Lewis. Again, I want to, but how many times when a running back gets hurt do we whiff on that handcuff, or what we think is the handcuff that's now all of a sudden going to up the production? A ton. Last year, Ryan, the waiver wire was decimated because of it.
Yeah, and if you go back to New York is another instance where I was saying that the handcuff doesn't work. We had Wayne Gallman last year when Saquon Barkley did get hurt. Plowed into the line 9 times out of 10, averaged like 2.5 yards a carry. The guy's not any good. So if Barkley goes down, that's why, sometimes handcuffing doesn't work, is because, go after a guy, that go for Zach Moss or someone in Buffalo, instead of, necessarily handcuffing your back in certain situations where you have a chance of like you said, I guess it's a good word, as you said, whiffing on the handcuff. Just because a guy's behind somebody doesn't mean that their production magically just falls down the depth chart to the next guy.
Right. Now, Chicago, let's talk about that situation, because I don't view Tariq Cohen as a handcuff. He's got standalone value as well. And to me, the ceiling's a bit lower for a guy like Tariq Cohen, especially if you're relying on those receptions. I'm in a half-point PPR leagues. You're telling me I could get this guy in the 8th round? Okay, I went light on running back, as I tend to do in a lot of my drafts this year thus far. Okay, I grabbed Tariq Cohen and expect that maybe he gets me 10 to 14 fantasy points per week as Chicago tries to figure out their quarterback situation alone. And being that I don't have the most confidence in David Montgomery, sure, at that point, I don't feel pressure, because, Ryan, I'm not actively targeting David Montgomery. Haven't gotten Tariq Cohen yet, but I'm more open to him rounds later, knowing that the ceiling is going to be a bit lower. And, hey, if it works out where I can put this guy in as depth as a flex 1 week because I've got some buys or I have some COVID players, then, okay, we try it out. That's how I view Tariq Cohen. I don't view him as a, quote, league winner.
No, definitely not. And as we've talked about before, I've kind of pushed all my chips in on David Montgomery this year, hoping for a better year. I think the Bears offense in general is going to be better, because Cohen wasn't all that great last year either. I don't know. I don't know what the whole Bears offense just stunk. But I mean, he's a running back who's definitely capable of catching 80 passes. I think he's better than James White. He's one of the best running backs as far as pass catchers in the league, and I do think whether it's Foles or whether it's Trubisky, kind of hoping for Foles, that Cohen is certainly a guy that you can use as that. I mean, I'd like him as my third running back. I wouldn't feel so hot about him as my second, especially once you get into bye weeks and potential injuries. But yeah, I've definitely have Cohen on some teams. I have, over the years for sure. And he's definitely one of these guys, like I mentioned, like Kareem Hunt earlier, that has that standalone value.
Right. I mean, looking at it again, for those that are just tuning in, first of all, welcome. Another week of domination. That's what we do here on fantasyalarm.com. And also talking about standalone valued running backs versus handcuffs with Ryan Hallam here. Ryan, always great at answering all 100 of my questions that I ask him every single live stream. Ryan, let's talk about the situation when it comes to Tampa Bay, because I just don't know what to think. Trying to track these, especially for ADP TV on the site as well, which I've been doing. I mean, Ronald Jones, is he capable? Yes. However, I mean, they do have Vaughn there. Whether or not he can be trusted, that's one thing. But then you sign LaShawn McCoy as well, who didn't make that impact really. This whole situation to me is very murky and one that I'm almost looking to stay away from. But do you even know who the handcuff is in this situation? Because they have 4 backs.
No, I don't. And I don't know that I trust Ronald Jones all that much. The fantasy community seems to be very split on him. And I don't know if the people like him because he's kind of actually active on Twitter, and actually I've seen him respond to some analysts out there. So, like, then all of everybody's like, oh, Ronald Jones, you're so great, man. Like, is he really great? I mean, he couldn't differentiate himself from Peyton Barber for, like, how many years? He was a disappointment year after year. I know they have Tom Brady, which should improve the offense some, but Jameis Winston threw the ball all over the place last year. So he certainly should have been able to run the ball, and they couldn't at all. I know they've improved their offensive line some, but I'm not – if Ronald Jones runs for more than 800 yards this year, I think I'd be surprised. Vaughn, I like, but everything you're hearing is – bad reports about him. We're not hearing anything good. His ADP, to me, I feel continues to drop with every draft that I do. And I feel like he's kind of become a value at this point. And LaShawn McCoy, I'm with you. I feel he has no value this year. He was a healthy scratch for the Super Bowl. I mean, he could not even dressed. We expect him to go another year older and go somewhere new and have a big impact. I think he's shot. I think he's just, I don't know, hanging on for the paycheck, trying to pad his career numbers a little bit more. I'm not sure, but I certainly don't expect him to come in and have an impact. He's apparently a great locker room guy too. So maybe, to mentor some of these guys, maybe he just wanted to be with Brady and Gronk and figured this is going to be a fun year this year. I mean, it's in Florida, so it's good weather. But for fantasy purposes, LaShawn McCoy is a big fat zero to me.
Right, and when you're confused with this type of situation, just stay away from the run game completely, because there are situations like this where it's not as direct, where with the Cardinals, you have Kenyon Drake, you have Chase Edmonds. There you go. Very direct right there.
Straight handcuff right there.
Yes, just a straight handcuff. When it comes to another team such as the Broncos, and this is becoming harder and harder for me, Hallam, as we continue in draft season here. Melvin Gordon. You would think they got him so he could be the guy. But I feel like he's still not getting the respect he fully deserves from the fantasy community. I thought this guy was going to be straight up second rounder all the way. I'm seeing him go a lot in the third. And now is it because of Phillip Lindsay, you think? Does Phillip Lindsay have that standalone value either? Because if so, seeing him where I'm seeing him get drafted in that 7th round area, I'll start taking him more and more. I'd rather almost take him than maybe a Latavius Murray if you think that's the way we go.
I don't know what to think of Phillip Lindsay. It just seems like they keep bringing in someone to take the job from him, and he keeps kind of taking it back. I mean, not that Royce Freeman was any great shakes, but he just has continued to differentiate himself and get the carries and get the touchdowns. I was with you, like when they signed Gordon, I'm like, well, that's death nail to Lindsay. And it certainly doesn't seem like it is right now. And if we look at Melvin Gordon's career, he's always had nice touchdown numbers. I think he's got 1,000-yard season, in his career. So are we more infatuated with his name than his actual production? I don't know. I mean, he looked horrible last year. I know he held out and didn't come in till, the 4th week of the year. So maybe he sat his ass on the couch for 2 months. I don't know. But when he came back, he certainly had zero burst. Austin Eckler looked 100 times better, and the Chargers' offense got worse when he came back. So I've drafted Gordon several times because he keeps coming to me in like that fourth round when I'm looking for a second running back, and I see he's like 8 touchdowns every year. But I do it, and I hold my nose when I hit the draft button. So I have him on several teams, but I can't say I have it with utmost confidence. And I do think that Lindsey is going to have a role regardless of Gordon's health.
Now, those running backs that we mentioned, guys like Murray, guys like Lindsey, there you can draft and have that value a little bit once you've addressed other positions if you're going best player available, which I've done a little bit more. And Hallam, we've discussed this on other live streams as well. I'm gearing towards a direction of looking at that best player available more rather than being obsessed with making sure I have at least 2 running backs, even in my first 4 rounds. That seems to work with me a lot better because it helps me even get the players I want on more teams rather than restricting myself in making sure I check a box and fill a certain position. You feel that as well?
I feel like we differ a little bit on this. I do like to have 2 running backs in the first 4 rounds. Like I said, I'm drafting Melvin Gordon and holding my nose.
I don't mind it, by the way. I don't mind it. I'm just saying that I'm not married to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just, for me, I always say, and people ask us to analyze their teams or whatever. I always say you can never have enough running back depth because generally the position that goes down, faster than any other position. Normally, quarterbacks are pretty good. Last year was a little bit of an exception. Wide receivers are generally pretty durable, but running backs, take a beating, and their shelf life is the shortest. That's why in dynasty leagues you don't focus on them too much because there's such a turnover. But I feel like running back depth is really important to have. So I do like to try to get 2 fairly early, and then I like to pepper maybe a Hines or a Cohen or a pass catcher, and then take some shots with a little bit later on in the draft.
I just want to say this, Hallam, and I think this is a good interlude right here for those because a lot of people are setting up leagues right now. This is exactly why you don't go after default rankings and settings when it comes to setting up your league and making sure you check everything, because I believe it's ESPN, Ryan, that if you do not change it, the max running backs that you can draft on your team is 5. That's it, Ryan, 5. So you're right. And if I want my entire bench to be a group of running backs, not the strategy I would normally employ, but go for it. That's my prerogative right there. So that's something that people have to change. Otherwise, they're going to be maxed out at 5, and they're going to get very frustrated because that kind of sucks.
Yeah, especially if you're like 22 rounds or, a deeper draft, 15 rounds. All right, I can see, but I don't understand. I've never understood that maxing out how many people you can have on your team from a certain position. Other than a league like that was my brother got me into a couple of years ago, but you had to have a minimum of so many on the team too, which was completely stupid. So there was people on my bench I couldn't drop because I had to have 5 wide receivers or something like that. So putting restrictions on rosters is certainly a big no-no for me.
But as a default, Ryan, come on, man. Who would choose that option? That's what the default should be. It should be a most common practice. Who would actively choose to limit positions? You want to make me put out a starting lineup? That's something else that if it's not listed in the rules, that I'll break every time. It's a loophole, and I'll get away with it every single time. You want me to field this whole starting lineup, including kickers and defenses? You put it in the rules, fine, I will do that. That's one thing. But if you have site software that has default settings of limiting how many running backs I can draft, a lot of people I know build heavy running back rosters, and I shouldn't be limited because of that. That's my choice. If I want to be very top heavy with running backs, want them to take up my entire bench, and then I start eliminating week by week as I see receivers on the waiver wire or take advantage in trades, I don't see what's wrong with that, Ryan.
I'm with you 100% there, sir.
Yeah, it just bothers me, and that's why. This is all your fault that I brought this up, by the way.
That's my fault.
No, it's not. It's not. And neither is this situation that we're in. The Colts, Taylor, Mac. How the heck do we handle it? Because Mac's value right now is too good to pass up, whereas Taylor's is very, very questionable. If you're telling me that I want to pay either 3rd round for Taylor, who I haven't seen on the professional level, or Marlon Mack, who I don't love, but expected to get a good amount of carries, and you get him in the 8th, 9th round, that value to me is almost too good to pass up despite it being a more boring player.
We seem to be kind of alone on this island together, I think. Everyone else, I feel, has just left Marlon Mack to die, and we are a couple of the people who think he's not quite dead yet. I mean, this wouldn't be the first time we've heard huge hype over a player, a rookie coming in, and people write the incumbent off, and the veteran holds the job, and the rookie can't seem to crack it, or he can't pass coverage, or the coach doesn't like him. He gets in the doghouse for something. People are just, and I know that Jonathan Taylor's a great running back, a great college career, no doubt about it. But I mean, it just seems like we're anointing him awfully quickly. I think that Mack will still have some value. I think it may not last all season. I think there's a decent chance that Taylor comes out and eventually takes over the job. I believe this is also Marlon Mack's last year in his contract, so you'd think the Colts would want to get as much out of him as they could before they're going to, I would be shocked if they re-signed him, given the fact they just drafted Taylor. But, why not run him into the ground for one more year and before he goes?
Yeah, and I don't even need that. I don't need that. You want to give him 15 carries? Give him 15 carries. I'm fine with that. Again, I'm not looking for him to win my league. I'm looking for him to help my depth, to help me out if I lose a running back or two. This is not a guy that's being drafted as my second running back. I might be crazy in certain aspects of my strategy. I'm not that crazy, though. I'm not waiting that long for my second running back, and there could be amazing receiver after amazing receiver on the board. I'm just saying that, look, if the value is still there, even though it's not a, quote, fun player, then why not still draft him if I don't have to pay starter's price, Brian? And something else I'm not paying starter's price for at this point. And I just am so confused about the Detroit Lions. Do you have a good read on them? Because I sure as hell don't. I was in the Kerryon Johnson business last year. Wasn't that fun? Wasn't profitable. I know you got to take it year by year, but now I've got Swift to deal with as well. How are they going to use him? Have no clue. I'm not going to have a single 0 shares of the Lions run game. What about you?
I'm going to agree with you here, but I think the last time the Lions had a 1,000-yard rusher, I believe you were just a twinkle in your daddy's eye. Maybe not even then. I don't even know the last time they had a 1,000-yard rusher. The team can't run the ball. They don't run the ball. Their offensive line stinks, and Kerryon Johnson can't stay healthy. I mean, that's just a bad situation. We were just talking about the Colts. Guess what? They have a great offensive line. So whoever runs behind them is going to do well. Well, guess what? The Lions don't. So whoever runs behind them isn't. So unless DeAndre Swift comes out and he's just, Superman or he's just got moves that we can't understand, he's gonna have a whole lot of problems running behind that line. So he's a great name, had a great college career, comes into a situation where if he can't take over Kerryon Johnson, just wait, because Kerryon's gonna get hurt. I mean, I hate to talk about a guy like that. His injuries happen. It sucks, I'm sure, for his career. But, again, we're in the fantasy business. We're in the business of helping people win. Stay away from Kerryon Johnson. He's going to go down, and he's not on a good running team. And Swift, if his ADP was 3 rounds later, I'd like it an awful lot more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I was just going to say, you can either go after Swift and Johnson between the 6th and the 8th round, or you can wait until after, because we're not sure it's going to be a flip of a coin, and not put as much risk out there and not pay as big of a price and get Marlon Mack. And I'm not trying to be the Marlon Mack guy. I'm just looking at the value, and I really like it. And again, my expectations aren't so high for him. If he could get another guy, 10 to 13, for depth purposes, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it works out just enough where it floats me for a week or two where I'm out half my team. These are things that everybody's going to have to think about right now. And that's why, and that's why we go over stuff like this. And there are a ton more running back situations we could go over. I mean, I've seen reports lately when it comes to Miami, you would think it's Jordan Howard for the most part all the way, but the jury's still out on how much Matt Breida is going to be involved. I was loving Jordan Howard very much, but then when the Breida trade happened, I was just like, no, because Breida's going to be questionable. You know this, Hallam. He was in your camp. He's going to be questionable every single week. We're not going to know what to do. We're not going to know how it's going to hinder Jordan Howard. That's not keeping me away, but it certainly does make things a little bit more interesting considering how limited Miami is already. Where do you stand on Matt Breida?
I always liked him as a 49er. here's the thing. He tries harder than almost anybody. Like, he will stay out there until his body is broken in half. He will not come out of the game. He's one of the fastest running backs in the league. I always have stats of, like, the fastest runs, and he's always up there. So he's a good, gritty player. He's a good pass catcher, which is going to be his role because Jordan Howard isn't. So he's another guy to me that has some of that later round standalone value that I think, Jordan Howard is. He can be a workhorse at times, but it's over 16 games. I can't see him getting the ball 20 times a game. So Breida is another guy who I feel you can draft and you're going to be able to put in there. His durability is a concern. Like I said, he's always churning for that extra yard. He never goes out of bounds. He takes many hits that he doesn't need to. So there's injury concern for sure with Breida, but I do like him. But back to your last thing about going for values and rounds. The best thing you could do is just mock draft the hell out of it for the next week and a half before your actual draft comes. We have the mock draft army. 4 nights a week for Fantasy Alarm. That way you can test out all kinds of things. You do your thing where you get 2 running backs in the first 6 rounds, and the next night do my thing where you get 2 running backs in the first 4 rounds.
Right.
So the mock drafting is so important as a way, and then you'll see kind of how things go because we don't have bad drafts. I mean, people are there for the entire time, and they're the best way to go. So follow Andy Spiteri on Twitter.
There's one rule. There is just one rule when it comes to the Fantasy Alarm mock draft army, because we do take these draft positions, these ADPs, very seriously. Please show up if you are going to participate in said mock draft army. We have to have everyone show up. We take the ADP data. That way we could be on top of all the trends. And Ryan, this is what it's all about, man. We can continue going over this all day. Let's see, maybe if we're back together, we'll go over the other half of the NFL that we have not covered. But you have to understand the difference between a true handcuff versus a standalone value running back. Follow Ryan Hallam on Twitter at Fighting Chance, me at Fensterman Sports. Ryan, as you said in the voicemail late last night to me, we always continue to dominating. Why is that, Ryan?
No other option, baby.
That's right. We just win.